it first. And right behind the frontal cortex, there's this parietal cortex, and it has the same thing for sensation. So at the very bottom is your mouth, at the middle is your arm, and somewhere at the bottom is your leg. So it's really fine. It's really finely mapped. All right, and the reason that we know what the frontal lobe is for is this man. His name is Phineas Gage, and he worked doing construction of railroads. And the reason he's holding this big stick is that this big stick made him famous. So this is a big metal rod that he was packing some dynamite into a hole with, and he detonated the dynamite, and this rod went through his head, like it's shown here. It went in his cheek and came out the top. And the reason that he got famous is that he was some super kind of tough guy, because he was a railroad worker. And he just kind of shook it off, and they pulled the rod out, and he lived another 30 years. But what they found about my man Phineas is that Phineas, yeah, first problem. his mom didn't like him. Named him Phineas. What they found out was that he got a lot meaner. So he couldn't plan anything, and he got meaner. And so that's kind of our whole basis of what the frontal lobe, the front part of your brain, is for. Is based on, it started with this guy, because they found that when he lost his frontal cortex, you could see right through his cheek and up out the top of his head. And so they knew that the frontal cortex was damaged. And they found out that the frontal cortex is important for both planning, like planning out, so he could do things. He would stand up and then he'd be like, what do I do now? I stood up for some reason, but he couldn't keep the sequence of events in his mind. And he also, he couldn't be nice anymore. He kind of reverted to like little kids, you know how they just like hit each other and it's kind of okay because they don't know any better?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't know any better. The frontal lobe is your know any better part of your brain. All right, so that's the frontal lobe. Next I'm going to talk about is the occipital. Has anyone ever heard that word?
Yes.
Seriously?
No, I did.
I haven't.
And then it's derived from that O word in Latin.
Yeah.
Oculus.
Wow. You guys do have this all down. That's awesome. You're exactly right. So if it came from a word like oculus, what do you think it's for? Perfect. Yeah, you guys are set. So it's kind of strange because your eyeballs are here and the vision part is way at the back of your head, but that's the only thing it's for. The whole back of your head is for vision.
Wow.
And this is why I need glasses.
That's why you need glasses because of your eyeballs. So the way that your vision works is really cool, actually. So and this is something they found for people who have strokes, because when you have a stroke, a part of your brain dies selectively and the other parts are still okay. So what they found is that if you have two eyeballs, most of you. So you have two eyeballs, and if you were looking straight ahead, everything that you see off to the right is coming into each of your eyeballs, and it's coming into half of each of your eyeballs. And those halves are getting together in your eyeballs, and they both go to one half of your brain. So everything you see on the right side of the room is being seen by the left side of your occipital cortex.
So it's mismatched.
It's mismatched because it crosses over, yeah. It's a little confusing. It's a lot confusing, actually. But most things in your brain actually cross over somewhere. So it'll almost always be opposite of what you think. Sorry. I didn't design it. So, so this occipital cortex means that this occipital cortex is set up in these very stereotyped ways, so that your left occipital cortex only looks at the right side of the room, and if you could map out the whole of space on the occipital cortex. So if you zapped a part of the brain, and you'd see a dot somewhere in your vision, and then if you zapped a little bit higher, you'd see a dot nearby that. So it's called topography. Is that no? Okay. It's called. It's just like a map. Map is all topography means. It's a mapping of the outside world onto your brain. This is why when you have a migraine, the migraine gets to this part of the brain at the back, and it's slowly moving across the brain, which corresponds to slowly moving across your visual field, because the brain is set up in a map of the outside world.
Oh.
Okay? All right. Awesome. All right, so that's the occipital part. How about parietal? Anyone heard that word before?
No.
Yeah, that's a weird word. All right. So the parietal part is, so the frontal part's in the front, the occipital part's in the back, and the parietal part is in between at the top. And what it's for is, as I showed you on that the homunculus. Anybody? What's homunculus mean? That's right. I didn't tell you yet. You have to look it up. All right. So what I showed you on the homunculus is that right here at the front of homunculus means little man or something like that. It's obviously one of those Latin or Greek words. And they used to think homunculus used to be back in what's that guy's name?
BCs.
Back in the old days, when philosophers got to control science instead of scientists, they thought that there was a little man who sat inside of your head, kind of back here, in something called the pineal gland, and that he pulled all the levers to drive your body. And his name was homunculus, or little man, I think is what that means. Yeah, and so they kind of keep these words because they didn't know anything about how the brain worked, because they didn't have any surgery, they didn't have any way of like looking, they didn't have the tools.
It's a little man.
But you do have something like that, and that's this strip here that controls, that has all your sensation, and the strip right in front of it that controls all your motor. So that's part of the parietal cortex, and the rest of it is integration. So it has, down here is the vision stuff, right here is the touch stuff, right here is your hearing, and you need something to bring all those together, and that's what your parietal cortex is for. Oh, this is cool. This is my favorite. All right, guys, get fired up. I like the enthusiasm. It's not gonna work, but I do like the enthusiasm. Hold on. Yeah, exactly. So the first time I saw this, I stared at it for like 30 minutes. You guys are not gonna get 30 minutes to stare at this.
Does it have sound?
It doesn't have sound. It's just this face mask on the tape.
Oh, that's right.
Awesome.
So it's neat because no, I wanted to repeat. Anybody?
No.
Rayon.
It's open up the playlist. Go to view playlist.
Oh, wait. Flip it.
And then is there a repeat option at the bottom there?
Yeah.
This thing. Loop. Brilliant. All right. All right. So it's interesting because I know it's harder to believe because it's just a video, but even with this real mask, it's hollow, but your brain doesn't let you. Your brain says that's ridiculous, basically, and that part of your brain that does that is your parietal cortex. So it's taking all the visual information and saying. So the back of your brain does things like dots of light, lines, but when you get to things like faces and really complex structures, that's up in your parietal cortex. And what your brain is doing here is it's saying, you can't see the inside of a face, that's ridiculous. So as you're rotating around, your brain, even though if you really focus, you can see that you're seeing the inside of the mask. If you don't focus, if you just relax, what your brain says is, oh, the face flipped, because your brain is not used to seeing, isn't used to seeing the inside of the face.
No, y'all don't see it. That is creepy.
Like right there.
It look like it's
right in the middle, you can see it.
Yeah, right when it's about to go to the
It look
back,
like
it'll be
it
like.
look like it's turning that way.
Oh.
Down, you ain't see it?
I did.
All right, there's
She
actually,
said too bad.
I have a handout that's
Too
kind
bad.
of like that. It's another thing that your brain is filling in for you. Yeah, we can do this really quickly. Really, I'll do this at the end if we have time. But it's neat, and it's something you might have noticed at some point in your life. But if you cover one of your eyes, everybody cover one eye, and you move your finger around. And I'm sorry, look straight ahead. Cover one eye and look straight at this. So look straight ahead as you can. And then move your finger around, and there should be some place in your vision that it disappears on you.
Yes.
And it's called your blind spot. And
Well, what disappeared?
Wait, and so do we keep looking at
It's
that
like you
point
can
where
look
it's
through
Alright,
your
everybody.
finger.
cover your right eye. Look straight at the intersection here, and don't move your eyes. That's the tricky part, is your eyes want to track and follow. And then somewhere right about here-ish, you should lose your finger.
No, I didn't.
I did.
It's kind of hard to notice. That's why I'll give you
did
these
it.
handouts at the end, and we'll try it again. But
You cannot see your fingers.
Like
Yeah, the problem is your eyes always want to follow it. Your eyes are good at what they do. So, but what the fact of the matter is, you lose. There's a piece of your vision missing because of how your eyeball is constructed, and your brain just fills it in, and you never notice it. So, as you're looking around this room, you don't think there's a big piece of the world missing. You just think, oh, it's all good, and that's part of your parietal cortex too. All right. Oh, we did that already. Touche.
I do it all the time.
Right. So the only part of cortex left is this temporal cortex. Does temporal sound like a word that anyone's heard before?
Temporary.
Temporary. Anything else? No. Okay. It doesn't matter too much. It's named temporal because temper is time, or some word associated with temper is time. And this is right over the part of, or under the part of your head that gets gray first. Like if I had some hair, you'd see that hair here turns gray before hair here. And so that's why it's called the temporal lobe, because it's over the part of your, it's under the part of your skin that ages first. So it's not a useful name. That was the upshot. All right. So this, I guess I didn't put a slide in, but this part of your brain is really important for memory and for hearing. Like I told you before, your ear, all your hearing is contained right here at the top of your temporal lobe. And the reason that we know it's important for memory is there's a whole bunch of really unfortunate people who had epilepsy, which is a disorder where you have seizures. You guys know this?
My dad has.
Okay, yeah, strobe lights can set it off, or like sounds, or all sorts of unluckiness can set it off. And they used to take out, and epilepsies, lots of them start, like I said at the very beginning, which you probably don't remember, but epilepsies are too much excitement in part of your brain. And what they can do is they can try to map out where that too much excitement is, and a lot of the times it starts here in the temporal lobe. And so they used to take out people's temporal lobes, and they got this really amazing deficit that people just couldn't remember anything. So, or they couldn't learn any new memories. So they could remember the house they grew up in and like friends they had 50 years ago, but they couldn't remember who you were. There's this really famous guy named HM. They just use initials in medicine so that you're not, calling out their family. And he saw the same doctor every day for about 25 years, and he never recognized her. Every day he could like tell her about things in his past, but he couldn't form the new memory of who she was.
That movie Adam Sandler.
Oh yeah, 51st Dates.
Yeah.
Perfect. There you go. 51st Dates. Or there's a movie called Memento. That wasn't quite as fun.
51st Dates, that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Why can't you forget
She
these
don't have
dates?
the
She couldn't make
temporal-
new memories.
Why
Yeah,
can't it be
it's
the
exactly
same?
that. Without this part of the brain, you don't make any new memories.
And they had to keep telling her every day about what happened.
Yeah, and it's amazing if you ever meet one of these.
And that man had a 10-second memory.
So this, the next thing I'm going to tell you about the brain, this is almost the end of the cortex. Oh, all right, then we'll just skip this part. We're kind of running short on time. But
you're fine on time.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, this is really cool then. You guys are going to love this, or I love this. You better love this. You ever heard about like right brain and left brain people?
No.
Yeah. Like some people say you're more left brained. You're kind of like
Artist.
yeah. I'm not sure which way it is.
left brain.
Artistic is right brain. Okay, so you're left brained. You're more like a
Well, I
scientist.
think I'm right.
Or you're right brained. You're more like an artist. You more like have more like emotion in your life. You're more driven. Driven by your fine skills instead of your
He
science
said
skills.
all girls.
And it could be slightly gender biased in a way that. But a really cool, there's a really cool set of experiments that showed kind of how the brain is working together, how the parts are working together, and they were done by this guy named Roger Sperry, who worked around here over at Overland College, actually, right outside town. And what he did was, this was also in epilepsy patients, and so you have two hemispheres, half circles of your brain that are mirror images of each other. So the left half and the right half look exactly the same from the outside. And what he found is that, and they're connected by a big bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum. Yeah, you don't have to write that one down. And what he found was that you could cut this and you could stop people's seizures because it could keep the super excitability on one side of the brain from spreading to the other side. So he did this to all these patients, and what he found was really fascinating. All right, so this is his like basic experiment. This is a person, sort of, and they're looking straight ahead at this